Discourse in the Novel by M. Bakhtin. Mikail Bakhtin's essay Discourse in the Novel, first published in Russia in 1934-35 and later translated into English, is a foundational text in literary theory that reshapes our understanding of the novel by emphasizing its inherent plurality of voices. Bakhtin introduces the concept of heteroglossia from Greek different tongues to argue that the novel is a unique literary form because it doesn't speak in single voice but rather incorporates multiple languages, speech types, and worldviews. Unlike poetry or epic, which are often characterized by monologic, single-voiced expression, the novel is dialogic, meaning it stages a dialogue between different perspectives, ideologies, and social languages. According to Bakhtin, the novel orchestrates heteroglossia and this orchestration gives it its distinctive capacity to represent the complexity of life. Bakhtin defines heteroglossia as the coexistence of varied kinds of speech within a single language, such as language of the peasant, the nobleman, the scientist, the bureaucrat, and so on. The novel thrives on this diversity by allowing different discourses to interact, conflict, and shape one another. This is most evident in characters who speak not just with individual voices but from particular social positions, historical moments, and ideological perspectives. For instance, in Fyodor Dostoevsky's novels, characters are not mouthpieces for a central authorial truth. Instead, they possess what Bakhtin calls ideological independence, each articulating their own truth in polyphonic fashion. This polyphony, a term borrowed from music, refers to coexistence of multiple valid voices without a final resolution or authoritative closure. Bakhtin argues that the novel is fundamentally shaped by its relationship to language, not in the abstract sense but its concrete, lived, and contested forms. He opens the idea of unitary language, the ideal of a single, purified, correct version of language often promoted by grammarians or nationalists. The novel resists such linguistic centralization and instead exposes language as stratified, social, and dynamic. As Bakhtin writes, language is not a neutral medium that passes freely and easily into the private property of speakers' intentions. It is overpopulated with the intentions of others. This means that when a novelist uses oaths, those oaths carry histories, connotations, and ideological baggage. The novelist must therefore work through and against these existing uses, creating meaning through interaction rather than isolation. A central technique the novel uses to enact this linguistic and ideological diversity is double-voiced discourse. This occurs when a character or narrator adopts a voice that echoes another's word with irony, parody, or critique. For example, Charles Dickens often uses indirect speech and free indirect discourse to show how characters internalize societal norms only to subtly subvert or mock them. Similarly, Jane Austen masterfully uses free indirect style to blend the narrator's and characters' voices, creating a layered and ironic effect that lets the reader critique both. This double voicing enhances the dialogic nature of novel, and each utterance becomes a space of tension between meanings rather than a fixed truth. Bakhtin also places the novel in historical context. He traces its roots to carnival culture, the folk tradition where hierarchies are inverted, the high is brought low, and multiple voices speak freely. In contrast to classical genres like tragedy or epic, which reinforce official narratives and heroic ideals, the novel emerges from laughter, parody, and popular discourse. It destabilizes authority by giving voice to marginalized and the unofficial. This idea resonates with Mikail Bakhtin's observation that the novel is the most democratic of literary forms. It also linked Bakhtin to later postmodern theories to see the novel as a space of resistance and subversion. Bakhtin's ideas contrast with those of new critics and formalists like Clint Brooks, who focused on unity, irony, and the text's internal coherence. Bakhtin rejects the notion of the self-contained unified text. Instead, he insists that meaning arises through dialogue between text, between characters, between authors and readers, and between languages. In this way, he anticipates the post-structuralist emphasis on intertextuality as seen in Roland Barthes, and the idea that language is inherently unstable and contested. However, unlike deconstructionists who emphasize infinite deferral of meaning, Bakhtin maintains that communication is possible precisely because of this dialogic interplay. Meaning is not lost but dynamically negotiated. Importantly, Bakhtin sees the novel as a historically grounded and ever-evolving genre. It absorbs and reflects the tensions of its time, drawing in various speech genres, legal, religious, scientific, journalistic, etc., and reworking them with a literary frame. Thus, the novel becomes a living chronotope, a concept Bakhtin develops to describe the inseparability of time and space in narrative. A chronotope, like the road in the Pikarskoy novel or the threshold in Gothic fiction, shapes how characters experience events and how meaning unfolds. The novel's chronotopic flexibility allows it to represent the flow of history and the multiplicity of human experience better than more rigid forms like lyric poetry or epic. In conclusion, Bakhtin's Discourse in the novel is a landmark theoretical text that redefines the novel not as a unified artistic product but as a site of dialogic interaction, where competing voices, languages, and ideologies intersect. Through concepts like heteroglossia, polyphony, double-voiced discourse, and the chronotope, Bakhtin elevates the novel as the most dynamic and socially responsive literary form. By resisting monologic authority and embracing the messiness of language and life, the novel reflects the richness of human culture and ongoing struggles over meaning. For students of literature, Bakhtin provides not only a framework to analyze the novel's structure and style but also a philosophical lens to understand literature as a living dialogue between the self and the old. Thank you.